fan the flame. Empowered minds rise and soar. Use your own AI. We'll explore. Help the future hand in hand in this tech-driven wonderland.
Okay, hello. We have another episode of NEAR.AI Office Hours. Today we have Paolo joining, CEO of Tether, and also CDO of Bitfinex, I think co-founder of a Whole Punch and lots of other things, I'm sure. So thanks for coming. Very excited to have the conversation on AI, on how kind of future AI evolves with money, with stable coins as well. And what you guys are also, I know you've guys announced that you're doing AI stuff on your side as well. So welcome. Do you want to give like quick intro and also how you've been thinking about the space?
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's very, very exciting. I think that AI has always been one of my passions. Definitely, the last 2 years made it even more possible, given the growth of Tether and so our augmented capabilities. But basically, just for the people that don't know me, I'm Paolo Ardoino. I'm the CEO at Tether. As you said, I'm a computer scientist by formation. I started coding when I was very, very young. Nerd about sci-fi. Anything that relates to new dimensions of words. So I'm probably Asimov my preferred author. So all checks out, I think. And yeah, very, very excited to be here. So thank you for the opportunity.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, we're big fans of Asimov as Alex as well, and sci-fi in general. So yeah, maybe kind of the topic to start from is we talk a lot about kind of user-owned AI and why it's important, but I think it's still worth kind of from your perspective, what is the importance? How does this been how does values of crypto, right? They've obviously been in crypto for a long time, informing you how you see the AI space and how it should evolve.
Yeah, I think look. Until 2 years ago, you wouldn't walk in the streets and hear people talking about ChatGPT or AI in general. It was such a 2 years ago feels like more like 20 years ago in terms of awareness of AI as a technology with one of the most incredible potentials in the world. And so that kind of scares me already, because what we see now in AI is very centralized. There are multiple reasons for that. Building large language models, I think is one of the most obvious products of this AI sprint that we had in the last few years is very, very expensive. So you for sure have seen how Elon Musk built a 100,000 H200 and 100 GPU cluster. It comes very, very expensive, I can tell you that. So it's not like any random person can think to compete with that size of models and access to human knowledge and data all together in a single place to build a very, very comprehensive model. So the fact that is already an elitarian effort kind of defeats some of the principles that I think brought us into the crypto space. The ability to run your own node, the ability to or build or be your own validator, control your own money. It's at the core of the ethos and philosophy of crypto, and why Bitcoin started, right? In 2008 was that the ability of the necessity of making sure that you don't have to trust others in order to be a self-sovereign individual. And while it's great that we have Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies to solve the monetary part of our lives, everything else is very, very centralized. I'm as a nerd and as a developer, I made among my I really don't love every sort of books, but I've been formed. My mind has been formed over the years about thinking about the worst case scenario always. And so I feel like the way I try to describe it to people is that when you open a smartphone and you pick 20 apps that you have on a smartphone, they will only work in the best case scenario, where the best case scenario is the world is largely at peace. There are not major natural catastrophes, no global wars, whatever. Like those, WhatsApp and similar will keep working when in the best case scenario. In the worst case scenario, nothing that you have on your phone, everything that you have been used to, every single tool that you're using to speak and interact with your family, friends, and co-workers, it will stop working suddenly. And the more we invest in AI, the more we build, productivity around AI. AI being centralized will also fail us in the times when maybe we will need it the most. So the realization that we need to start pivoting towards building technology that is resistant to the wrath of God and resistant to the worst case scenario is what excites me.
Makes sense. Yeah. I also use this example where right now, effectively OpenAI, assuming, and I think everybody really, sees this happening already, AI tooling will become more and more contributor to GDP. It will become more and more intervene into how businesses doing like day to day. Imagine OpenAI is just like, tomorrow is like, you know what, guys, let's just turn off Germany, right?
Yeah.
Or like Italy. More like Italy. Yeah.
Yeah, or Italy, or whatever, right? Or like EU, because like, hey, we don't want to deal with GDPR; it's too complicated, right? I mean, Meta already just did this, saying like, hey, you cannot use our models in the EU, and so now you literally have like country or the whole region that's not able to access what is effectively becoming a massive GDP boost and massive life improvement and kind of potentially core businesses built around this, and that's not anymore already like capitalism. That's literally a control, and so now when whoever runs these companies comes to these countries, they effectively have this control over these countries now to be able to effectively say, hey, we're going to turn off 20% of your GDP. This is just like a firewall rule, right? So I think like, to me, that's like it. And again, this can happen because the government decided, like specific government decided to do this or whatever, or like individual or company, like that's a very dangerous situation that we're like really moving quickly into. And so, yeah, like very much agree that we need to build for a really like a permissionless usage of this technology and ability to do this. And I think the interesting kind of point that we've been facing is that the problem is the open source, right, also doesn't have money and doesn't have ability to, invest. For context, I think Elon Musk's cluster is about $3 billion to build. So open source, like, somebody sitting in research institutes definitely don't have access to this kind of compute power. Although, prices are going down and for H100s in general. So one of the things we've been spending a lot of time is like, how do we create a open source, permissionless, but also monetizable system for AI. And I know you guys also been kind of looking around. I'm curious kind of what you guys been looking at in this area.
Yeah, look, we have three. So first of all, Tether started with doing a very important strategical step. So we purchased the majority interest in a company called Norton Data that has in this moment 24,000 GPUs. It's not 100, but it's still is honest work. And the reason why we did that is we wanted to create the first or the biggest independent AI infrastructure provider in the world. To us, that is very, very important because we need to be less dependent from Google, Microsoft, and Amazon and now X that are actually capturing the majority of the output of NVIDIA. I believe in the future we will see more and more specialized chips, more ASICs chips that will be perfect and accomplish certain, certain or be designed for specific type of models, so that the cost of chips will go down and there will be less general purpose. But it's a great way to scale things, I think. But for the time being, we wanted to start from that step, because you could have the greatest ideas, but if you don't have control over your own infrastructure, I think you're kind of dead. Second, we have a very good and well trained AI training team. So we are searching existing papers, and we are looking to build our own models. And train our own models. So that is something that we started doing since the last 6 months. So we formed a team that runs fully within Tether data. Third, we are building a software development kit that is gonna be the aim of this software development kit is actually being with the same code you can run a model from on a $30 smartphone, on an embedded device, on a smart TV, or on a smart fridge, or on a car entertainment system, or on a laptop, on a server, mainframe server with 8 GPUs, eight 100 GPUs, or multiple server with hundreds or thousands of GPUs. Same code, of course. If you are in a $30 smartphone, you would pick a model that has like 500 million tokens. The more you scale, you can scale up and down, but same code base, same logic runs everywhere. The reason why we're doing this is, and also we are building a communication layer based on hole punch that allows the creation of like a horde of tens of millions of AI agents, fully peer-to-peer, without any central server, that can interact between each other without any sort of interference from overlords. And third, we added we just finished to develop. We released the first version of a WDK that is a wallet development kit. I believe that agents should have their own non-custodial wallets. Because I doubt that PayPal will start onboarding AI agents. I think that in the next 10 years we are going to see the number of transactions made by AI agents be 10 times the transactions that humanity is doing. So that has to be peer-to-peer. That has to be non-custodial. That has to be, of course, non-custodial doesn't mean that AI agents can start buying their own beer. You can still enforce through, natural language constraints in the ability or their ability to access the, let's say, the wallet part of things. So safety is still very important, but it's important also to make sure that whatever we build is scalable and is not only controlled by one single company, but we can empower people and developers to build agent systems and models that can run everywhere and can scale in a very peer-to-peer way.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here. I actually maybe wanted to start from hole punch because I've seen it before for the communications, for the chat. And we also been looking a lot at like how to improve peer-to-peer communication, how to add a layer of guarantees around that. So, and I mean, I also very much aligned that going to be a lot of either agents or services that provide different value to other agents, and kind of how to interconnect them, how they're going to discover each other. So curious, maybe, like high level, just maybe describe hole punch and kind of we can discuss how that works.
Sure. So for the people, I think most of the people are familiar with BitTorrent. The one story that I really very much like is the history of file sharing systems. So you have, at the beginning was Napster, and then Napster was shut down because it was fully centralized. And then you had Gnutella, then you had LimeWire, then you had eDonkey, then eDonkey plus Cadembia, and then you had eventually BitTorrent. And after BitTorrent, you don't have much else. Why? Because every step before BitTorrent was basically not complete, or was lacking, or was still relying on certain parts of centralization. So, for example, LimeWire had some peer-to-peer file sharing, but in order to find the files, you had to connect to a specific server or multiple servers. So the indexing, so the indexing, the list of all the files available was centralized, and so then you had issues with that. And so over time, also with BitTorrent brought, basically, compared to all the previous attempts, was fully decentralized database of all the different files, and also full on peer-to-peer file sharing. But on top of that, added a technique that is called hole punching, that is supported by basically all the switches in the world. That allows, you remember sometimes with LimeWire or eDonkey, you had to go in the router at home and basically configure it so that you could redirect the connection from the internet to your own computer. That was okay, but it was only for the geeks, right? My mother couldn't do that. And so what BitTorrent brought was this hole punching technique that allows to bypass firewalls. It's very simple. It's very secure. It's not like, oh, now everyone can connect to my computer. But it really created a very simple, user-friendly way to connect to two peers that wanted to connect to each other. So you had an handshake, and if the two peers wanted to connect, it could bypass the firewall and bypass all this complexity in configuring routers and switches and so on. So basically, Hole Punch started a few years ago, 5 years ago, with the realization that the BitTorrent protocol, that is a set of protocols between hole punching, swarms. Also, BitTorrent had this great idea where if you want to download a file, you can also create basically a public attestation of, you can split the file in multiple chunks or blocks. And you can create a public attestation so that suddenly, if multiple people, you could download the portion of the same file from multiple people that could attest to have that portion of the file, right? So very, very cool technique. And so we came to the realization that the DHT, the distributed hash table, that is the distributed database that the BitTorrent had, was great for multiple use cases, not just file sharing. That swarming, so the ability to access content, was great for example, live stream content as well. And the concept of hole punching and was great for peer-to-peer, so you didn't have to have complex configurations. So basically, we started rebuilding all the BitTorrent protocols around the JavaScript and C++. But we also enriched them with all the knowledge we could gather from the cryptocurrency and the blockchain world, because BitTorrent was not really focusing on ID, for example, was not really focusing on more complex cryptographical solutions. So we added basically all the cryptography to add the provability of data, and also, for example, establishing real-time connectivity among the different peers into Hole Punch in a very extremely modular way. Hole Punch is actually more than 500 different small repositories of code that all together you can pick any portion of it and use it as Lego to build any sort of interaction you want. That's why I think that as of today, I think Hole Punch is the best networking layer for any project you might want to build. Full stop, right? I believe that we put so much effort, so much work, and there is so much in there that really you can build crazy things. For example, Kit, that is the sample alpha version app, the communication app that we built. Now we have a chat that is we have a room with 2,000 people that were able to exchange more than 2 million messages with file, GIFs, images, whatever, among each other in a full peer-to-peer way without blockchain, really fully peer-to-peer. That is something, I think that is one of the most complex coordination efforts that humanity ever went through. I wish, it's in Insights, it's not even that difficult, but it's just the focus of building that. And the reason why we were able to achieve that as well is that the fact that we have, of course, great talent. Matthias Bus is the CEO of Allpunch, is one of the greatest engineers. But also we had the commitment and the capital from Tether to not have to build everything for gaining yet another dime. We could open source basically everything, and hundreds of projects and repositories are now open source for that. So we could build it in a way that it's built so that not even us, it's such an unstoppable technology that is built without controls inside, without string attached, so that it can keep surviving and will be a net positive for humanity.
So you mentioned that BitTorrent was perfect, so there was no need to improve it. But I always found it fascinating that there was never a like there's no incentive layer in the BitTorrent, right? So like for popular files, they will be there because many people will be seeding them. But for something less popular, there's no incentive. So I was always surprised that no incentive layer ever on top of BitTorrent ever became popular. I'm sure they exist, but interesting.
BitTorrent token.
Yeah, now I think Justin created the BitTorrent token.
Exactly.
I don't think it's the right approach. So, big, very popular files, you have the inherent incentive to, buy their own distribution, of course, because if you have a great file that everyone wants to see, of course, a super legal file that everyone wants to see, then that is your incentive. Now, then on the other side, I think where BitTorrent a little bit failed in is like you need to be able to. If I have a file, for example, I want to be able to create almost like federations among my family and friends. So if I have a specific file, it's not like I want the rest of the world being able to access it, right? I don't want to publish it on this super huge DHT and make it available to everyone. So the reason why we started creating the Allpunch protocols is that you should be able to create your own BitTorrent network amongst 3 people, among your own family, right? So without having to go through the huge BitTorrent network. It's almost like a very fractal way of thinking about things. So if you imagine that you want to share with your family, you want to have a repository of all your family photos, right? That your inherent interest or incentive of your family is to look at the photos because they are the photos of your family. So now you don't need to waste everyone's time in creating incentives for everyone to be participating or sharing encrypted versions of your photos. You still have the inherent interest in sharing stuff within your family, and most of the realization is that like the phones that we have today are like 10 times more powerful than a mainframe server of 10 years ago. They have a ton of storage, and also you can install at home. You have like you can have a laptop at home, or you can have anything, or you can even use cloud backup storage if you really wanted to. But for most of the people, like most of the devices are more than enough to keep all the family photos forever. Because with peer-to-peer, if you had your own small BitTorrent network across like the 5 iPhones of your family, it would be infinite storage, more than what you are paying Apple for. And you would have your own resiliency built in because you can share peer-to-peer the files among each other and create some sort of resiliency. And if you want more resiliency, you can just pay for an additional redundancy layer that is offered by a cloud provider that will just keep you an encrypted copy of your files so they cannot decrypt those files, and you're safe, right? So the incentive has to be done. Society is built on incentives, but incentives are not only monetary incentives, right? It's just gather incentives, is collaboration incentives. So you have to look at from the small to the big, right? In terms of incentives and in interaction incentives.
I was also curious in your model of the worst case scenario. So obviously the worst case scenario, well, I guess the worst case scenario by definition is the worst. But the bad case scenario has a I mean, it can
Shades of
like a gradient. Yeah. So I guess the question is, should we also optimize for the case where the internet is gone, right? So, like if superpowers start pillaging each other, should we start building
radio and a P2P network?
Yeah.
So when I was a researcher at the university, I worked on a very cool project. So, and I think that one of the reasons why Hole Punch is so cool is that one of the core data structures of Hole Punch, and I tell me if I'm becoming too nerdy here, but one of the data structures of Hole Punch is called hypercore. That is a Merkle log. The beauty of a Merkle that you can subscribe to. The beauty of a Merkle log is that is a very simple data structure with high throughput. So you can keep adding messages, and the fact that you are Merkleizing it, you can prove the fact that no one tampered with that, and you also can understand which point of history you are, and so you can do very interesting things. So back when I was in university, I worked on this project where if internet was gone, you could still build devices or have devices that that you install in each car, and when the cars go around the city, that are carriers of information, right? So it's one of the core functions of a mesh network. You could do things like that. So I worked for like a military project where we're in the battlefield. And in a battlefield, it's crazy because you don't know what you are going to have, right? You cannot make assumptions. So the technology that you build has to be very flexible, so that imagine that for 3 hours you don't have connectivity, and then suddenly you have a blip of connectivity. You have to be able to sync a portion of the information and make sure that you know exactly how the portion of information you synced, and then maybe you don't have any more connectivity and so on, right? So you need to have these data structures that you can subscribe to. You understand the integrity of the data structure that and the portion that you had so far. So actually with Hole Punch, you can create really crazy, like a catastrophe, nuclear wars type of connectivity system, higher resiliency connectivity system. So that is actually, I think about it a lot, both when I think about the AI strategy, communication strategy, and so on, because it's very important. Even in a catastrophic scenario or in a war scenario, the satellites will be shut down, right? So, so everything that you have at your disposal will be probably wavelength radio, and this like a really high latency. You need to assume that the latency in a war scenario is like 2 days, not 50 milliseconds.
Yeah.
I think worth mentioning that this technology right now is live, and it's live in Apple products actually for the finding, like find my iPhone, find my pair. Yeah. It's actually funny that the military technology found its way into some of this. But ideally we would have this kind of more as like core primitive that everybody can use for their applications, instead of it's like a very specialized protocol that only Apple can use.
Absolutely. And well, they could get there because of distribution, right? So they distribute this technology across every single product. But eventually, I think that is something that is successful. Can be, you can have an app that does that in the background of your phone, right? Can be that in the worst case scenario, everyone can turn on that feature, and then you start forming this huge, crazy mesh network.
Well, ideally, it's just the default, and all operating systems support that.
I wish that that would be definitely, it's how it should be, 100%.
Yeah, well, I think we're all building toward that. Yeah, I mean, we obviously, I think 3 of us definitely nerd out on this, and there's a lot more to discuss there. But maybe circling back a little bit to some of the AI topics. So I think you guys are, seems very systematic, right? Okay, let's make sure there's hardware. Let's make sure there is, generic kind of ability to run the models. Let's make sure these agents are interconnected. What do you think is kind of a use case that can showcase the need for effectively kind of private, kind of unsensible, permissionless AI tech. Because I think we all align on values, and like Alex declines to use Google and some other products, for example.
Great.
But most people are not like that, right? And even if they value privacy, they don't actually do anything to adjust that. So what would be interesting products that people can latch on to kind of to start using this tag, because that's the only way to do it?
Well, imagine that I want to build the best Paolo assistant. To me, the best Paolo assistant would have access to all my emails, all my calendar events, all my chats, anything. Like even I can keep it enabled all day long, and basically should record me because I might want to recall something later. It's almost my mental palace, right? Do you see or do you foresee any way to do it with any centralized company? So would you give full access to everything, including your most intimate discussions, to an external company? I don't think so. I mean, I think that although many people are using ChatGPT already with the very privacy sensitive stuff, I believe that there is a limit to that. It's like then assuming that now people are already asking their question, oh, is Alexa listening to me? Because then they talk about the fridge and the next day they go online and they find an advertisement of a fridge. But imagine instead if really every single thing that you say will be listened to and recorded somewhere else, and you will never be able to get it back. You will never be able to get your life back. So someone could actually build an Illia assistant and be exactly as precise and as thoughtful as you eventually with time. It's very, very scary. So you will be replaceable if you give up all your most intimate thoughts and the information that is what is making you, then you will be replaceable. So the more we should fight for people not to be replaceable. We should not make, because the more is more, otherwise we are just working for a global AI and make ourselves redundant. So I think that if we want, and we should have, I want to have the best Paolo assistant. I want to give it all my information, but I need to know that that information stays within my devices and written in an encrypted, so all the tuning and fine tuning, all the training and fine tuning for those large language models on my emails should remain in the data structure that is encrypted and is accessible only to me. Or anyway, if there is a backup copy, I chose where, and the private key of that encryption is only mine.
Yeah, I mean, we totally agree. This is actually something we're working on right now, is how to build effectively, and how to train models in such a way that even though I mean, for base model, you know what goes in, but the parameters themselves are encrypted, and you can only use it inside effectively TEs. But yeah, if you fine tune it, for example, on your personal data or instruct it with your personal data, that's also fully private and kind of end-to-end encrypted. And also, all of this is monetizable to ensure that there is actually a way to continue developing new models.
Yeah,
But
I think it's...
sorry, go ahead.
Please go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say that this premise of people not giving, not being ready to give that much information is not quite. I think for majority of people, they will be okay giving up all their private information, and that sort of happens with Gmail, right? So I think the same people who are very concerned about Alexa listening to them and sending them fridges, they use Gmail to send all their legal documents, marriage certificates, medical records.
But now we are coming from a very passive tool that was spying us for the benefit of one single company. There is a difference between making money on advertisement versus technically replacing us. You can actually replace a person. So maybe the first 10 million people will accept this. But when the others will see that the first 10 million people will be replaced by AI, then they will become more careful. So I think that maybe just because of in immediate interest for people to become more productive, some people will accept this. But eventually I see that there will be a counter tendency in the future, in the long term, to avoid this, because then you will be replaced, and in some countries you will be jailed if your information will be obtained in such an intimate way. Because on your emails, sure, you send legal documents, but it's different than, most of the people say different things in their house, in the privacy of their house, rather than what they write in their emails. They are much more polite in emails rather than what they write in the house. So I would say that eventually we will find a balance and people will become more intelligent about it.
But also another interesting thing is, how do we, because it's one thing to have a technology that allows you to have this private AI on your site. It's another thing to actually make sure that, like, you need to educate people how to install it, right? How to make sure that it doesn't, like the data you can get from those devices is quite powerful. So there's going to be an effort, right, to get the data. So it's like we need to educate people how to install the software exactly in the way that their data doesn't go somewhere, and they would need to be able to have they would need to have a way to judge which actors are good, which actors are bad, who's on their side, who is not, right? It's like the most private search we had was DuckDuckGo, right? And the only way we know that DuckDuckGo was not collecting our data is that their terms of services was saying that was the case, right? Which is very weak.
I think one of the most interesting things, in my opinion, is that search will change. Since I was a kid, I always dreamed to build my own search engine. I think there is something in search engines is like a search engine is a proxy for human knowledge, right? We see it as a search form, but actually it's so much more deep than that. And so I think that with AI, the ability of AI that AI has of summarizing information will change search forever. So I think DuckDuckGo is a good example. Like they actually they indexed something, but also they are relying on other search engines to provide more like fresh information and so on. So that is not great. That is not a sustainable solution, right? You don't want to be, it's almost like DuckDuckGo is a proxy to hide yourself behind, but in the end, the information will still get to Bing, for example.
Yeah, to Microsoft.
That's not. Yes. So maybe I think the way to build a search engine is to have like distributed knowledge and have like peer-to-peer search, right? So, and the fact that AI can compress a lot of information, you could think about AI summarization techniques to compress a ton of information in smaller forms so that can be distributed more easily. So that are things that I think are very exciting for me, and I think the world will change around that. So even search will become more private over time, just because I think that eventually we as in the crypto industry, we will figure out ways where also data can be distributed, redundant, and can be accessed peer-to-peer and search peer-to-peer, because we can get levels of compression that were not easily possible before, thanks to like LLM summarization.
I have a couple other questions about, we discussed a lot of things. They were populating in my queue, so I will be jumping between the things we were discussing. But one
Sure.
is, you mentioned a couple of times already the concept of replacing a human, right? And I think it's an interesting concept because to some extent, for many people, the replacement they would prefer not to happen is they would prefer machines not to take their jobs, right? Because the job is a very important part of our lives, and that will happen. Whether it happens does not depend on Alexa's listening to people, right? So either AI becomes good enough to replace humans, right, or it doesn't become good enough to replace humans, right? So it's like that's somewhat orthogonal, right? But I think this is not quite what you're talking about, right? You're talking more about like replacing the identity of the human, if I understand what you mean,
replacing
right?
society.
Replacing, so replacing a particular human as a unit of society, right?
Yeah.
But isn't like I'm trying, like in my model of the world, there's a human outside of the internet, right? Like I go to a I don't know, like my local game store to play Magic the Gathering, right? So that unit of society cannot be replaced with AI. Then there's another me who goes to MTG Arena to play Magic the Gathering. That unit of society can be replaced. So maybe it's not such a bad thing if our online identities get replaced and we have to spend more time in the wild.
Well, you can see it multiple ways, right? So I think that so we should look at the big picture as well as like I predict that in the next 5 to 7 years, every car manufacturer will start building humanoid robots. And you have Tesla for sure now, but they have the assembly lines to do humanoid robots. And if you have humanoid robots plus AI, funny because when you have that, it's not like you can install easily an open source brain, right? So they will come. It's like if you buy a BMW, it has its own entertaining system. It's not like easy to go in there and say, oh, well, now I will put Linux into it. Sure, but if you put Linux into it, then the car will start crashing you in the wall because it's not anymore more certified. It's not great, right? So most of these humanoid robots will have very close source brains. So in the next 10 years, you see that many big companies already said that they will start experimenting, replacing the people serving at the store with humanoid robots. Then humanoid robots will have artificial intelligence in their brain, right? Of course, they will not be remotely controlled. They will have artificial intelligence in their brain. So eventually you might need to play Magic Gathering against a humanoid robot. So, and then might become better than you, right? So eventually the replacement of humans will happen in almost any possible scenario, apart one, in my opinion. So one of the best investments that, in my opinion, one of the best investments that we're doing is called BlackRock NEAR.AI. You could say that BlackRock NEAR.AI is a competitor to Neuralink, but actually Neuralink is a competitor to BlackRock NEAR.AI. Doesn't have to do anything with BlackRock. So I think the only way for humans to survive to the growth of AI and machines and the evil control of AI will be having a mathematical coprocessor in their brain. Our brain now is great, but it's very limited. Any thoughts, any idea you have in your brain is so colorful, so powerful, so detailed. And then you speak it or you traduce it in a natural language or in a programming language that is a compression form from your original idea. So when you do that, you will lose a lot of information, and also the latency of communication is super high. And by the way, the natural language, so the why is in this way, because it's, the way we express our thoughts historically has been through a mechanical system that is our voice, right? So you cannot do anything else but compressing, creating a system that only can adapt to voice to compress the information you have in your brain. So what we need is actually, in order to not be replaced, we need to be able to continue our evolution as Homo sapiens sapiens sapiens, so sapiens cube, in order to remain unique and not become just meat for AI. So if you want really to bring the discussion further on human replacement, then it's not just about jobs. You're completely right. But eventually, if AI will start assuming personas, and these personas will become more and more complex and will go around the world, that can become kind of Matrix-like. And maybe I'm wrong, but even if there is 1% chances that I'm right, maybe it's we should do something about it, right? So I think about these problems all day long, basically.
Yeah. So another question I had was, you mentioned you guys are about to start training large language models. So I'm curious if this is something that will be sponsored by, I don't know, Tether and created as a public good, or if you have some ideas of how those models will be sustainable. Like, will they be hosted through the API? Will they be open source? What is the plan there?
So we plan to create have different strategies. So first of all, especially for medical research centers, we plan to provide some free allocation. I think is very, very important. It's much more important that we devote this AI power to medical research rather than using it to, I don't know, solve an integral or a derivative faster, right? So sure, everything is helpful, but I think that if human health is very important. So also second, the idea is to so we see the importance of being able to create models that can run locally, can be trained and fine-tuned locally. So you have, I would imagine right now, if you run a 30 billion token on a $30 smartphone, you get 6 tokens per second. On an iPhone, you get around 200 tokens per second. That is kind of our benchmark. But if you take an iPhone of 5 years ago, it was like 10 tokens per second. So the leap, I think that there will be a huge generational leap on the next few generations of edge GPUs. So that will lead also the ability of starting from an existing model, doing anyway localized training and fine tuning. Of course, you lose some performance and precision compared to the super large language models like 1 trillion tokens, for example. But on the other side, the way I see it is that you can compensate that having a very distributed peer-to-peer network of agents and models that, for example, you can have the best chemistry model in the world that only knows about chemistry, and then you have the best physics one, the best Italian pasta cooking model, and so on. So you go actually much more vertical, and then you build orchestration tools, and you build like bigger models on top of them in order for getting access to this more vertical knowledge. So I think we need to actually start fractalizing the way we see the concept of models, so that eventually you can train them with common hardware rather than having the need of creating these huge models. Also because I think eventually companies like OpenAI and similar will struggle to have will struggle a lot to keep accessing the amount of information that are accessing now. So I think that people will become smarter and smarter in terms of not publishing everything public for the for the consumption of OpenAI, right? So think about how search will change, as we said before. The entire search business has been kept together by advertisement. But now you go on Google, you search something, and Gemini gets you a summary of that information. And if summary gets a summary of the information you're searching for, then you have less incentives to click on any link. And if you don't click on any link, you will not generate other revenues for the people that created that content. So the way information will be privatized is going to be mind-blowing in the next 5 years. Mark my words. So the only way to scale that is actually building a super scalable, super decentralized network of agents that will run their own data stores with their own fine-tuned data, and they can monetize that.
Yeah, I mean, I think effectively copyright is going to die in the next 5 years because like copyright is the Gutenberg press technology, and it cannot apply to effectively this recombination of data into like compressed data into models.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of, obviously discussions from here to take, but we are actually out of time. I really appreciate you coming. I think we need to continue this conversation. There's a lot also on both sides that I think we can work together.
Yes, we could
but I
speak for
hope it
days and
was-
days and days.
Exactly. Yeah. I think we separately need to nerd out on like the networking stuff because I think both you and us find this fascinating. But I think I wanted to thank you for coming. Hope this was informative for folks what Tether is doing, as well as how you see kind of the evolution here. There's a lot of philosophical questions to be discovered by all of us as we pushing this envelope. But I think it's exciting time to live for sure.
Thank you very much for
science
having me.
fiction is turning live. So as
Yes.
we speak.
Yes,
And
and unfortunately, we are not going to have the.
documentary.
Oh, sorry. I was saying that unfortunately we are not going to have the positronic brain of Asimov books, right? So the three laws of robotics, I don't think there is an actual way to enforce them. So
we actually been speaking about this. So one of the frameworks we look through is a formal verification, and so we kind of see actually as a future of software as well as like other places requires formal proofs. Because without formal proofs, like all software is going to be broken by malicious AI effectively. Yep. So you need like actually completely correct software. But so if you apply that same principle, you can actually require that whoever you call proves to you that they follow specific rules. And so if we can formalize Asimov's, three laws, we can potentially, have that as part of the interactions we maintain.
Very cool. I like this additional nerd out.
It's worth mentioning there was 4 laws before his death. This main protagonist came up with the zeroth. I will leave it for people to Google it.
To Google and to read the books. All right. Well, thank you very much, and hope everyone enjoyed the conversation. I did. Bye.
Thank you.